Welcome back to Ninja.Energy. Today we're going to go over a simplified pivot table, how to create it, how to create a summary, and we're going to do a bonus of how to add a calculated field. That's pretty simple, but we'll do a calculation inside of the pivot table for us. To get started, I will need to go over a few things. First, the data tab that I have has a black bar going down it. Now a pivot table does require all the columns that you have will have to have a header, which means what's in E1 does have to have something written. And because I use a black bar to differentiate between where my formulas are to the left versus the raw data to the right, I need to be able to have a header there. And what I do is I call that blank. So if I change that color to red, it stands out quite nicely. But normally I do keep it black just to keep it hidden, just for aesthetics of the work, the worksheet I'm on. Alright. Secondly, we're going to mirror the sum ifs tables that we had created in a prior video, but this time we're going to do it in a pivot table. So you can get the exact same thing you have here, just without having to write all those formulas. Now there's pros and cons behind it, but for today's purpose, strictly just pivot tables. Just so you know, it is easier to reference a specific cell location without a pivot table in its place, which is why the formulas are a little bit more effective. But a pivot table could also store that information, and you can call that using another function called getPivotData. But we're not going to go through that today. We're going to keep it very simple. So first, I need to insert a pivot table. Now, I'm going to insert it here on the summary sheet, but I have to tell it where my data is located. So where is the range of my data? It is on my data tab. We're going to use columns A through columns L. Now you can be specific and specify the rows, but typically if you're building a report, you're going to keep adding data to it over time, and in turn you don't want to have to keep updating your pivot table's range. So the column is preferred. Where do you want it to be created? You could do it in the existing worksheet on the summary page, or you could create a new worksheet. In this case, like I said, I'm going to keep it in the current summary page so you can see how everything looks. So it creates the pivot table, nothing in it. It's the baseline. Over to the right side, you're going to have your quadrants at the bottom telling you how to add in which area. So either you're going to do filters, add items as columns, add items as rows, or values where you're doing sum up, counts, averages, etc. At the top, you're going to have all the different fields that are located in your data tab. So for this purpose, on the rows, we clearly want to see our team. So I'm going to drag team down to rows. So now we have our teams listed out. The first thing is I need a sum of all the calls. So if I grab number of calls and drop it into the values, you'll see where it says sum of number of calls. Now in the event this does not show up, you can change that. So you can click here, go to value field settings, and then you have some options if you're how you want it to change. You could do sum, count, average, max, min, product, as well as a few others. But for our purpose, we're going to be using sum today. Alright, the next thing I want to do is average handle time. Well, this is where our bonus kicks in today. We're going to do a calculated field inside of a pivot table that allows you to do a formula just being housed in the pivot table to do your calculations for you. So under field items and sets, you want to do a calculated field. What do we want to call it? We're just going to call it AHT, average handle time. What's the formula? The formula is handle time divided by total number of calls. So handle time divided by total number of calls. Hit OK. You'll see it populate. Now this has a lot of digits and we want to make it a little bit cleaner, so we're just going to format it just to have numbers to just be one after the decimal. Now you'll notice that it says blank as a team, and that's because when you look at all the rows, there are rows in our data set that didn't have any data, so those are blanks. So we want to filter that out just to make it look clean. So if you click here under row labels, you can uncheck blank, so we no longer see that. And now you see your equal team, Al, Raven, and then a grand total. Now it says row labels. If you want to rename that to where it says team, you just double click into it, and now it says team. Make it a little bit easier to view. If you want to reorganize these, you can. You can shift these up and change the order. You can make it ascending, descending, whatever you need. It is completely flexible. Now if I want to take that same table, but I want to make a duplicate of it to kind of recreate what I have under some ifs, the only difference here is I want to put in who the manager is. So in this case, I'm going to simply go up here, drag manager above the team, and now it's going to give me a summary for Brian and Rachel and give us the total counts of the calls. So it is very simple, very straightforward, and will give you your totals. A lot of benefits to pivot tables, but remember there are more powerful views. You could do power pivot. We'll cover that in another video. There's also a lot of other tools that will enhance these, but for now, keep it simple. This is a great route to go if you don't want to write your formulas. But they do have drawbacks. Where I have these two pivot tables stacked, if I get more teams on this pivot table, it could not refresh because it will interfere with the pivot table below. So you have to be careful. You need to be cautious of pivot tables to the right, left, and above and below. It's usually not recommended to have more than one pivot table on a given worksheet unless you know for a fact that they're going to remain always fixed in their position and not grow too much that would impede another pivot table. Now, you can enhance these even further using slicers, which is essentially a filter that sits outside of the pivot table. So I'll add that in here real quick just to show you. If I click on a pivot table, I can say I want to insert a slicer. So I want to click on insert, go over to slicer, and that will allow me to select a field that I want to use. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select team. Hit OK. Alright, this now lets me select which team do I want to see. If I want to click Raven, for instance, it will then refilter this table to be just Raven, or Al, or maybe I can use Control and select multiple items. If I hit Shift, it will deselect for me. So I can add and subtract from that filter as needed. There are many uses to this. You can also connect these slicers together. So I can say I want report connection to impact both pivot tables. So now when I select only Eagle and Raven, both of the pivot tables adjust accordingly. So keep that in mind. There are flexibility inside pivot tables. You can do slicing and dicing fairly quick. Many uses, but best to play around with it with the data you have. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to comment. Reach out to me and I will definitely do my best to answer all questions or provide additional videos to give you some enhanced views of whatever you're asking for. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel to get the latest content. Otherwise, have a great day.